Reverend Black and Floyd Wilson and Ed Miles had in mind when they started this group is that it would be a group of individuals who really cared about the community and were coming to get information and then use that information to build up our community. And I see soldiers right here in this group. So we are going to get started with a blessing. So I'm going to call Pastor Mitchell up.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Let us pray. Eternal God, we are grateful that you are God. We never want to forget that. Thank you for giving us a brand new day, giving us this grand opportunity to come together and share information, to hear Brother Chris Herring share of what he is doing and how it affects our city and our businesses. Thank you for the Lighthouse Group. Thank you for this food. May it be blessed and nourish us, and may this fellowship nourish us as well. This we ask in the name, I pray, of my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, well, yes, I see you already helping yourself. We're going to do that, and we're also going to get a chance to introduce ourselves. So it's real important when we come to events like this, we come for the information, right? Because we need to absorb it and then go back out and use it and bless somebody else.
I hope you're enjoying your lunch. We're going to go ahead and I don't think this young man, since we had a conversation earlier, this young man needs much of an introduction, but I will present him to interview Chris Herring. And he has a very extensive resume, and Joy's phone just blacked out on me. So I'll just say what I know about Chris. How about that? Chris, you know, has definitely a troublemaker, you're right. But a good troublemaker. There's sometimes that you need an agitator in your community to get things done and to motivate the rest of us to come on board. And so Chris has been that agitator, I would think, that person who's never been afraid to step up to leadership. Former military, former Black Chamber of Commerce director, not only for here in San Antonio, but also on the state level. I think many of us know Chris as a person who simply wants to see our community best represented, whether it be economic development or otherwise. And so he's a father, he's of two wonderful girls who are doing some fantastic things, and I think that can be attributed to their fantastic parents. And he's also a wonderful husband to his wife. And so without, I could say this because we're friends, without blowing his head up and saying too much wonderful things about him, which would be all well deserved, please welcome Chris Herring.
Well, you know, I appreciate the introductions from the heart, more so from a script. So I appreciate that introduction, Cassandra. Thank you. So today I was asked to talk about Juneteenth and the celebration period that we are in, and also to reflect on why we're here. And so for many of you, I text this week and I just said, hey, please come out to the Lighthouse because you're special to me. This event would not be right if you weren't here, because many of you have leadership roles that we're currently fighting good fights, but we need to have more of an army. And so I just appreciate again the fact that you took the time out of your schedule. Juneteenth in San Antonio is also defined as Byron Miller Day. And Byron Miller, as I told him via text, is a great man. And he's someone who I admire because he's always trying to make sure that Black people in San Antonio are aware of their history, but more importantly, that we don't forget. And so he's been putting together the Juneteenth festivities. And every year that he does it, it just is better and better. Now this year there was a scheduling conflict, and so the Juneteenth event, don't be going over and asking about when is the event. He already had the event. And it was a great turnout at the park, and I was getting text messages and so forth about just the leadership. So again, it's so good to see you. Thank you for sharing this day. I'm humbled because this is all about the topic that we're calling, Are Your Boots on the Ground During This New Day and Age of Jim Crow? And I appreciate the Lighthouse for allowing me to alter the topic, because I didn't really just want to come to be in a celebratory way, right, about our freedom. But I really want to talk to your hearts and to your minds about where are we and what do we need in this day. So, I went into my wife's closet and got her boots. Those are military boots. And for those who know me, I did serve in the United States Air Force for 20 years. And whenever we saw that we had issues, we went into battle and we had our boots. And so I asked the question, are your boots on the ground? There is this civil rights leader, activist in San Antonio known as T.C. Calvert. I don't know if anybody knows him. But he uses a great analogy that I'll use today, and he says, are you a tree shaker or are you an apple picker? And so we have to define sometimes where are we in the battle, because sometimes in the black community, in the African American community, our battles are not being won because we're not staying awoke. And it's a process that we have to improve upon. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this thing called freedom. So you all are historians and biblical scholars and so forth, so I'm not going to challenge your intellect about how we got to this day and this celebration of Juneteenth. In fact, Juneteenth really reflects the fact that after we did receive our freedom, it took about 2.5 years for us to be able to realize that we were in fact free in the state of Texas. And as I currently chair the Texas Association of African American Chambers of Commerce, and we waged a war for economic justice for black-owned businesses across the state, 24 chambers of commerces, 250,000 black-owned businesses. I hear really the same things at every location. Access to capital. Everyone's looking for more capital to be able to scale their businesses up and do more. Contracting opportunities. How do we get our black-owned businesses more contracts when the system is not rigged to give you more contracts? Job opportunity. In many cases, we create businesses because we don't have job opportunity. When I work with the San Antonio Observer, which is just a popular paper in San Antonio, we take on the stories in which no other major media source will take on. Now, whether you like the paper or you don't like the paper, that's not why I'm here. I interject when I see the need. And there was an article that was written about 1,500 jobs deficit in San Antonio, Bexar County, whereby when you look at other progressive cities, our city does not have the hiring rates as other cities do when it comes to African Americans. In fact, you can go to Austin and have twice as of a good of an opportunity to get a position in their city government than you can here, or even the county is twice as better than it is here. So what I've concluded is that San Antonio is under an apartheid system. And that word apartheid, I know we simply will think of it in very hard terms, but in South Africa we said it was apartheid. And when you see the minimal participation of African Americans, you have to call it what it is. It's apartheid. So while we're free, we still are subjected to new Jim Crow rules that have been established actually when we were freed. So let me say it like this. So slavery in America officially ended, passed by Congress on January 31st, 1865, and ratified on December 6, 1865. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery in the United States. And that provides, and let me quote it so you can hear the quote, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States." Ladies and gentlemen, I just gave you the loophole. Everybody say loophole. Loophole. The loophole is, while the Emancipation Proclamation freed us, Congress came back and put the proverbial loophole in place. And so when we look at our prison system, and you know where we are, we're in prison. The loophole is that they figured out that if we can get caught up in something, anything, and put us in the jail, then they don't have to deal with us as free men and free women. It's a loophole. Denzel Washington said in that movie Malcolm X, "Oh, I say it again. You've been had. You've been took. You've been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok." Who said that? You are right with me. So while we just experienced the royal wedding, and that was a beautiful wedding, wasn't it? On the surface, it was very beautiful. But as a father, I'm disturbed. I'm disturbed because if you turn on the TV these days, the imagery of African American or black women are now associated in commercials with Prince Harry's. You pick your commercial. My daughters don't see a black man in any commercial that's with a black woman. And that's disturbing, not because I don't believe that there's just, we need to love one another. I submit to love. But I do say that if you're going to lock us up and throw away the key and put us into slavery, and you deplete us of black men, then my daughters don't have any options unless we can destroy the loophole. The loophole that existed back in 1865 is a loophole that exists in our contracting processes, which exists in our employment processes, and it's very hard as a person who served in our United States Air Force to be able to work with people sometimes just because I know that our overall community is paying a very hard burden for this thing called freedom. And I wish, my wife says it, she says, sometimes I'm a little bit hard on myself. And I invited some of you because I've been too hard on some of you. And the way in which we're supposed to act is we're supposed to act as a family. But because we're so distracted that we don't even understand how it is to love one another. Had an interesting conversation recently with some of my Muslim friends, black Muslims who have the same heart as I have, that are moving the agenda forward, but yet in our own circle, we tend to even have discrimination against them here in our own community. How can we unify ourselves as a people if we're going to be hating one another because of the differences of religion in which we practice? I started counting, and I'm a Christian boy. I started counting who were the people who've been consistently in my corner by my side, ride or die. And I came back with at least 4 or 5 that are practicing Muslims. Now, my daddy is a Baptist preacher, and I understand how sometimes the word can be interpreted. But I do remember this, that God is love. And God is the judge. And so my wife says in a very eloquent way, she says, don't get all up into the semantics of what people practice. That's not for you. Your commandment was to love. So you do that. Let God be the judge and in terms of how he looks at all of that. That's not for me. So I learned that lesson, and that's a lesson I'd like for some of y'all to think about too. Because we need to have a unified community. We have one young man in this room who, and I would call Xavier young, but you're not young anymore. I'm gonna get to you. But Damon Nolan called me years ago and challenged me in my heart and said, what are you doing in particular for our black youth? And I said, well, let's meet. And we met for the first time, and we had a heart-to-heart. And I got to understand that my responsibility, the same as your responsibility, is to pick someone in our community that's young and to lift them, and to take them under your wings and to push them. I push my own girls and my son, I push them hard. And what I've learned is the harder that I push them, the more that they're able to respond to the call. My daughter said this morning, she says, Daddy, she says, you're going to be talking about what? New Jim Crow. Tell me about this Jim Crow. And I said, this is Jim Crow back in the day. He was a white man who put on blackface and did that little minstrel, show and so forth. And then what we did was we took the minstrel show, and then they made rules about how do you keep blacks confined and regulate them. So we had this thing called Jim Crow. And she said, okay. That reminds me of this thing called bullying. She says, because I can identify, Daddy, and she's 12, I can identify, racism. Shoot, my daughter's well-trained. And she says, so I just call it out like it is. And then she says, because it's the same as bullying. And she says, and we teach young people to say no to bullying. So why are we having in this day and age this problem with adults not calling a spade a spade? Why do we need to have this thing called courage that sometimes it's difficult to tell people that they're wrong? But then I surround myself with radical people who, like Grace Rose, who will call racism or prejudice or anything that's inconsistent with the values in which we believe, she'll call it. So that's a perfect partner for me, because I'm going to call it too. Sometimes I go home and I literally, and I won't say to the guys I cry, but I do for my people. Because at the end of the day, and the end of my life, I want to be remembered too, like Dr. King said, for living a committed life. Because 1865, when we did receive our freedom, we weren't free. We were in forms of servitude. We were still not free. And now we have this president who's talking about let's make America great again. And I'm sorry, I'm going to say this. Some folk will like to say that there's some things that he's doing that's good. And so you praise him for those good things. But you know what? I go back to my word. And my God he's a jealous God. And so he doesn't play partial favorites with the devil. He just doesn't. So on one day, you can give a pardon to a dead black boxer from Texas, and then have a cheerleader of blacks who say, oh, that was a good thing. Thank you, Mr. President, thank you. But the same man was a man who said that Africa is nothing but a shithole. Excuse me, young man. But that's what he said. And so again, I don't need to be in a position right now today where I'm agreeing with someone simply because he's our president. If he's not for us, he's not for us. If you marginalize and say that, well, he's doing some things good and some things bad, well, then you're just selling out our whole agenda. I'll say it again. You can't pick and choose with the devil. The devil's commission is to lie, steal, cheat, and destroy. So stop, is my message today. Stop supporting individuals who's not supporting you. We have the NAACP convention coming to San Antonio. And we have multiple messages that need to be said and talked about. Jobs is one. And let me say it like this. So, as an officer, retired officer, the Air Force pushed me every single day. They pushed me to get advanced degrees. I have 2 masters, one in HR, one in organizational management. My bachelor's from Boston University. I've gone to good schools, but when I apply for jobs, do you think I get callbacks? Come on, hello, I don't. So while I was in that isolated system called the military, things were so different there. Now I'm on this side of freedom, and when my brothers and sisters come out and they have their boots and everything, they get ready to put them away. Say, hey, Chris, can you help me? I'm going to apply for this job. I'm going to work for the, blah, 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 blah. And then I don't want to ever be a pessimist. So I don't say nothing. Sure, I'll help you. Just tell me what you need me to do. 9 times out of 10 in Military City, USA, when black soldiers, sailors, airmen, or Marines retire, they end up taking a contractor position, going back over into where? Afghanistan. They go back into the high-risk zones to keep a paycheck going. And then they end up back on Randolph and Lackland Plantation where they work. No, I'm sorry, it's the truth. Because that's what it is. And if we're not willing to say, okay, I'm going to take my time, talent, and treasure, everything that God gave me, and come out with a business and be like Dr. Burns and be an entrepreneur and expand your territory, then you end up going back to the plantation. No, I know that this wasn't the message you thought you would hear today. But I need to tell you that, if you're going to be ride and die, then you need to be ride and dying for the right things. Just don't be buying nice cars and not have a purpose behind it. Because the fact of the matter is that in 2018, we are still in a very, very, very bad situation. We're losing battles, and I never want to say that we lost the war. So you have to have battles and victories to win campaigns that win wars, for those who didn't serve. Take someone like Keith Toney talking about citizen. He is a citizen, former councilman, retired Army, did more years working on the bases. But as a citizen, his voice is always being heard. I appreciate that because he don't have to. He's worked hard already. The fact is that we still need to have more boots on the ground. I want you to pay attention to something. Whenever you hear the president or any of these leaders speak now, they always reference having a general. Do you know that? Have you ever noticed that? Well, the generals support this movement that we're going to do to increase and enhance our democracy. The generals have said that ISIS, the best way to defeat them. The generals say to run a small business, so they take patriotism of service and they push it within the messaging, and then that's supposed to make it easier for you to digest the things that are happening. So I have generals. I have General Al Flowers. That's my general. I got Colonel Jackie Jones, my wife. See, I'm rolling with an army. So I'm going to ask you, who are your generals? Who are your colonels? Because you have to have them. They're your credibility to what you want to do and how you want to do it. Maybe that's what we need to have, is a volunteer corps of military people who are your supporters. Because let me say this too, everyone in here has a mission. Everyone in here needs supporters. Sometimes you just have to be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, I just need you to be someplace. And no questions asked, you're here. I appreciate the fact today that when I was working with Laura Thompson, I was her chief of staff, if you recall, when she was a state representative. And some people said, well, why do you want to do that? Well, because I know that the power of our democracy is the power of our legislation. The power of our legislation is what creates 13th Amendments that have what? Loopholes. We have to do things this day and age more concerted and be more meticulous in terms of what we do. You know, with Terry Williams now being on Northeast ISD's school board, I'm proud of her because she's putting herself in the environment to help our children, protect our children. There's going to be an article in the Observer this Wednesday that you will read. It's about a black girl who is at a Northeast ISD school. And she showed up at school and she was dressed nicely to our standard. And she had some hoop earrings on. And a white young man said, why are you trying to be a hoe? Why are you trying to be a hoe? So I didn't know about what happened. I read this story because I was taking my daughter and her friends to do some things for her birthday. And so I had my SUV packed with girls that were going to do girl things, and I was asking them, because I had the opportunity to quiz them about, who are you? You know, you're with my daughter, so who are you? Who's your mama, who's your daddy, what's your values, what you believe in, what kind of clothes you wear, what kind of music you listen to, do you have a boyfriend, does Maya have a boyfriend? You know, laugh when they laugh, get into that conversation. And now all of a sudden, now I'm one of them, and they telling me, yeah, you know, Mr. Herring, woo, it's difficult being black and female. The boys in the school, the black boys, act like they want to be dumb. They dumb me down. And I said, well, why do they dumb me down? They said, well, I don't know, but they all dumb me down. Even the smart ones dumb me down. But we're not interested in them because we want smart men. But our men are acting dumb. One said, Ms. Herring, you know, I've been doing this, I've been doing that. My goal is to be a writer, and I want to write. So I said, you want to be a writer? I said, well, I'm not no person who was trained in journalism, but I do work with a black newspaper. I said, I'd like to see your work. You want to see my work? Well, you said you're on the yearbook committee. You want to see my work, Mr. Herring? I said, yeah, I want to see your work. So she showed me her work. And this is where I read about the hoop earrings. This is where I learned about the subject was my daughter. This is where I said to myself, hold up, we got a problem. We got a major problem. So for months, my daughter never said anything about that. But through the writing that I read of this young lady, she came up with a solution. My daughter came up with the solution herself. And she learned, and I saw in the writing that she learned how to confront this thing called racism. She learned how to problem solve with this boy without having her daddy to be involved, because I would have taken his neck off. And all I could say was thanks to God that she had learned a lesson and was able to apply some things in her life that I just would have, again, reacted totally different. So ultimately I did talk to the principal, and he asked the question, well, can you please tell me who the boy was, and we're gonna fix it. And I was like, no, no, we're far from there. I mean, the boy, whoever the boy is, my daughter taught the lesson. And so she's good, I'm good. But the awareness is what I wanted to make sure he was aware of. The awareness to know that there's still these things that happen in the good schools. There's still these attacks on black women that I believe today is worse than has ever been ever before. You know, when you have presidents who slam every black female member of Congress, when you have people who refer to black women as apes. So my question again is, do you have your boots on the ground? Because we need more voices to stand up for these attacks. We need more that will lead us from being attacked. Again, I just want to share with you some of the alarming statistics that you already know. If African Americans and Hispanics were incarcerated at the same rates as whites, prison and jail populations would decline by almost 40%. The imprisonment rate for African American women is twice that of white women. In 2014, African Americans constituted 2.3 million, or 34% of the total 6.8 million correctional population. Going back to that 13th Amendment, the loophole was there. And so, very quickly, the new Jim Crow, I define it as the attack against the black family. I define it as selective IDs to vote, whereby states are trying to put more rigor into voting, and we need to be able to vote. Adding more IDs discourages voting for black people. The arresting and detaining of innocent black men, we've seen it, we're seeing it, we're living it, it's happening. It could be you when you leave here today. And all it takes is one stop. I was stopped maybe 2 weeks ago in a speed trap. I knew I was walking away with a ticket. I started praying. I kept my hands up on, just in sight. Made some quick conversation with the officer. He came back and, Lord, bless me, I got a warning. See, that's the good news. It's not all doom and gloom. So the fact is that I'm giving you warnings today. And the warning is that we have to have more people on the battlefield. That old Christian song was, "Are you on the battlefield for our Lord?" In the military, we ask the question, are your boots on the ground? I ask you today, who are the generals in your battle plans? Because each of us have our own battle plans that we have to execute. Can we work together for the common good? Can we learn to love each other when love is difficult on most days? Can we put some of that stuff that we carry behind us? Can we find a deeper and common ground with our Hispanic brothers and sisters on issues in which we must move forward on together? In your battle plan, do you have a diverse group of people that just don't look like yourselves? Can we walk together without the habitual selling us out when others shine? I remember, and I'm going to close on this, I was on the cover of the Business Journal when I was the president of the Alamo City Black Chamber. And at that time, I guess I was a little bit too arrogant, and I probably hurt some people, and I made some enemies, and I apologize, because we all have made mistakes. So that's probably, some of that is real. But at the same time, what was more disturbing was not the fact that I was on the cover of the Business Journal, which was what some people try to take my head off about, right? Because sometimes we get jealous and envious. To me, the most disturbing part of the cover of the Business Journal was the fact that the title said, "Bridge Too Far." I was on the Hayes Street Bridge, and they were talking about economic revitalization of the East Side, and the topic, again, bridge too far. And the Business Journal slanted the article so that they said that we could never accomplish anything together, but yet the community took, there he is on the Business Journal, he thinking all that, as opposed to the real meat and potatoes, which is, they said that we couldn't come together and do something to make San Antonio better. So again, I don't have any real solutions for how do we move us forward. I think that we do have to have more unity in our city, more unity in our county. We have to be able to call people for what it is and make sure we are able to rally support teams around us that can help amplify the truth, the whole truth and nothing but. We got to be members of the NAACP. We can't question whether or not the organization is relevant. Please. Y'all got that? I paused, I said, please. Because on the real, it's all that we have. It's all that we have. So my encouragement is to make sure that you're registered for the conference, that you're volunteering as you can, that your boots are on the ground to be able to welcome a whole world to San Antonio. Have your business card so that you can pass them out and you can do some great things. Because we have to love each other. And I think that the city is the best place at this time for us to come together to move mountains. And together we can do great things together. I'm encouraged because we are doing great things. And if I didn't call your name, I apologize, but I've seen you. It's like, for instance, sometimes I watch things happen. I saw Frank Dunn at a track meet. And, you know, Frank and I, we don't be kicking it and everything. We don't kick it like that. But I saw the young people, and they were like, Mr. Dunn, Mr. Dunn, Mr. Dunn. Right? All in his airspace. And so I learned just by listening that he has something to do with the track program. And so I don't care about what Mr. Dunn does in his business, his politics. All I know is that Mr. Dunn is doing something that made young people say, Mr. Dunn, Mr. Dunn, Mr. Dunn, Mr. Dunn. And that's going to be great. That's how we make San Antonio great again. When we have things that come out of Northeast ISD, Terry Williams, Terry Williams, Terry Williams, Terry Williams. Well, no, but really, we got to do that together. Dr. Piper, Dr. Piper, Dr. Piper, Dr. Piper. Does that make sense? Yes, sir. Because we need a strong community. When Paul Foster wins, we all win. When Xavier Tolson and the African American Black Chamber of San Antonio win, we all win. We shouldn't even have this thing called chamber wars in our city, but we do. So let's make that right. Because 1.1% spend in the state of Texas with black-owned businesses, 0.81% in Bexar County at the prime contract level with black-owned businesses. We ain't winning, but we all need your support if we're going to win. So that's my message, really simple. Let's champion and work together, support one another, do as much together as we can. Let's love each other. Let's support our young people. Let's champion our young people. Let's smile at each other and not be all, because no, we have to learn a different lesson. The word collaboration is what every other community uses. So let's collaborate. Let's get over to TAN TV. Let's tell our stories and see how we can tell the stories even more. Let's collaborate. Let's build on something. Let's take the city's my brother's keeper that really is not the city's brother's keeper, and let's take it back. Because see, anything that's institutionalized with a city or a government is not truly our program. And I believe in my brother's keeper, but I don't believe, and no offense, but I don't believe that no city should be governing how black men and women govern love within our own community. If the first black president of the United States established my brother's keeper, then why don't we have our hands on it? Come on now, that's what we need to be. We need to be pumped up. In fact, I'm going to probably organize a takeover of my brother's keeper. I'm just going to say it here. You heard it on TAN TV. The revolution sometimes is not televised, but today I've televised it. So when you hear Herring says something about my brother's keeper taking it back, you heard it. You got it, Damon? All right. Because right now it's not being run by us, for us. That's why we have to mobilize. That's why we got to be passionate about it. Get people like the Godfather Floyd Wilson back there and get his brain back into the game and out of retirement. We'd be good.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.
All right. On that said, love you guys and thank you.
Thank you, sir. The real boots on the ground. Definitely identifying, because I just last week I said, well, you know, I come to the SCORE offices here in San Antonio and I'm thinking like, oh man, that's just a waste of time. And then I said, well, I'm in DC. Let me see what's going on. You know, we got a lot of us there. And I'm thinking like, well, maybe I'll get somebody that could, you know, give me some real relevant advice. And so then I went to the SBA in DC and I talked to the security guard about where I needed to go. And he said, well, I don't know if they can help you because I tried to get help for my Bills bonds business and they were not helpful whatsoever. And of course, yes, I got the same thing I got here in San Antonio, you know, so it would be wonderful if we could get, as people are finishing with their businesses, and if you could get over to SCORE so we can see somebody like us and give us some real relevant advice. And then totally having the same conversation with not just people here in Texas, but in DC about how some of our schools are not getting the same exposure, the students, as some of the students that are in the private schools and some of the other schools that maybe are not predominantly minority, not getting them out, exposing them to business and various, the legislature and whatnot. So you gave a good word today. And I know I saw a hand for a question, Ms. Deb.
Just for my own personal information, but by a show of hands, could you raise your hand if you're a native San Antonian? Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, I hope that you've been inspired. I hope that you've been motivated. I hope that seeds are planted and that we are going to, you know what, we're preaching to the choir really, because everybody who's here, well, you know, you're doing it, but maybe you'll encourage somebody else.
You know, I didn't want this moment to get by me or you all. This weekend I met a young man that was with the Border Patrol, and he came out to the festival, and he was recruiting. You talk about Trump, they are mandating that they have so many more new Border Patrol people in all types of positions. They're taking kids out of high school. All you have to do is have a high school diploma. That's it.
Oh, to be a Border Patrol.
For $52,000 a year starting. Next year it's $60,000. Next year it's like $80,000, $90,000. He said within 5 years they can make $100,000 with a high school diploma. And so I've got the information. I have with me today, right? When thinking about that. But I just thought about, you know, all our kids need jobs. And yeah, you're right. Trump hasn't done anything for us, but at least this is an opportunity because they have to hire these kids immediately. So we got kids graduating from high school now. If they just, all they need to do, he said to me, if they would just apply, that's it. That they could get a job, making $50,000. And Chris, you did a great job today. Thank you. I got something for you over here, but you said, you gave us a plan of action, a call to action. Now we've got our homework to do. So thank you.
Anybody else? Well, okay, no.
No?
I don't know if this is the right place to ask the question, but I feel very comfortable in the environment that I'm in today. I'm wondering how many of you have seen the ministers out of Alabama who've talked about the blackout. And those of you who haven't seen it, I think that you should see it. And the question that I have is, are we relevant? Are our boots on the ground with what is going on in America? And should we participate? That's it.
Tell them what it is.
The blackout are some ministers, most of them that I saw were Seventh-day Adventist ministers, which is neither here nor there. But what they have said to the NFL is that they're blacking out the 17 weeks that are coming up. They're not going to support from a watching standpoint or buying any paraphernalia, because what Colin Kaepernick did was his constitutional right. And any of you who are military, it is the right, and what I believe our military fights for is our right to protest. When you do not have the right to protest, then you're living in a communist country. And what I have found, I hate to give commentary here, but what I have found is that those who don't understand about protest, they don't understand our country, and the main reason why I think that is because of my age, is that those people don't understand what America stands for and what our country stands for. The Vietnam War, which I was a product of, would not have ended if it wasn't for protest. I'm from Ohio, and when those 4 kids were killed in Ohio, at Kent State, that's when the war began to stop, because at that time we had drafts. People were drafted into the service. So our Congress people, their kids were being called away to the war, and their kids were being killed. Nowadays, it's our kids that are being killed because sometimes they can't find that job, Chris, that you talked about. So they're signing up for the military and on a voluntary basis. So from a voluntary basis, when you join the military, those people who are representing us in Congress don't understand what freedom is all about. And to me, Colin Kaepernick, those people that, 4 Dead in Ohio, and the things that were sung in Marvin Gaye and the songs that were sung, we don't have entertainers singing or talking about what's going on anymore. A pun, didn't intend it.
That's very good, that's right. And now, in today's age, we have all kinds of ways that we can protest. Whitney M. Young talked about, you gotta be at the table, and I know a lot of you are at the table. And so, but also it does take protesting. So yes, I wholeheartedly hope, I know some of you are great football fans, but I think that's a great idea to join in with the blackout. It's great.
Thank you. I would like to ask why she wanted to know, I'm sorry, who was from, Miss Debs, who was from San Antonio, and what was your...
I just have this thought that a lot of the people the black folks in San Antonio who are the movers and the shakers that have risen to positions that are influential are not natives. And it just is. I mean, there's something about that San Antonio mentality that doesn't always lift us. And I think we need to step up. I think you're right, Mr. Green, that's exactly right. I don't know, it's just something about our mentality. A lot of us, well, I won't say a lot, but a number of us have that crabs in a barrel kind of mentality. It's like, if you're getting up a little bit higher, well, you can't go unless I go with you, so I'm gonna pull you down. And I've seen that. I mean, in my 60+ years, I've seen that. And I don't like it. And I just wanted to know who in here, because you've come out, you've established who you are and that you really do care. Are you a native? And the answer is no. The majority of you in here are not native San Antonio.
But that syndrome isn't unique to San Antonio. I'm from Ohio too.
Oh, I'm sure.
It's very much.
I'm sure.
It's the same in every state.
I think the other part too is that people that leave, they just leave, you know, and that's kind of. I can hear you. I see that normally people that leave are just leaders automatically. Chris, you mentioned something about the Brothers Keepers program. We need to talk. Because we were actually the initial group, myself, Judge Bull, and 2 other people, and then they put this thing together because it was city funded. And once they did the city funding, you couldn't have the control that you wanted to do, and it was brought in Toyota and said we couldn't come past Houston Street with Toyota's money and that type of stuff. But there's something going on, and I'll talk to you about that.
Joy, remember, I may not need that mic, remember that.
Been doing it for a long time.
Remember that the original purpose for our gathering in the Lighthouse Group was to get information and share information. Keep that in mind moving forward. That hasn't really changed. That's the foundation. So Chris, to you, thank you today for getting us to come out with a strong marketing message of getting our boots on the ground. And I know that it's pretty strong when you talk about Jim Crow, but that gets our attention. But you also talked about something that's very important. You talked about when we get the boots on the ground, we're doing it individually. And as Deb just basically pointed out, this city goes back with its history because I'm a native San Antonio from the east side of town. We don't really work together. We don't use terms like partnership and joint venture and collaborate, only to a small degree. We don't support those who are in positions that we think they shouldn't have gotten or I should have gotten. Everybody or a lot of folks around here work individually. And yet we've got some level of success. But we could have so much more if when we're putting our boots on the ground and fighting, we're not doing it individually for ourselves. We're doing it collectively. But the only way that that's going to work is if we unify. This group will leave here today with the same message of understanding. There's no mistake what today's message was about. So you got 40-something people here today. This group needs to go out and talk about what we heard today. Not about Jim Crow, because that's history, that's important. We're not going back that far. But we're still not that far away from it either. We're living a dream, but the dream isn't absolutely vivid and clear and wonderful. And that's because we don't always do our part collectively. Now, I'm not a politician, and that's not what I'm up here about. I am up here about what the Lighthouse Group was established and founded for, to share information with you and to let you know that these things go on, and it's important that a group like this, the fact that you only have 40 people here today, you are the ones that are going to send this message, and so you clearly have to understand what was said today and then go talk about it. Not individually, but get to your churches and your organizations and associations and talk about what we talked about. Because with our leadership today, we're taking giant steps backward, and it's very disheartening. I want to thank you guys for coming. I'm glad to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
So, in the interest of time, I'm gonna, so I know some people are gonna go, so what I'm gonna do is just tell you that the mayor is coming up, I believe October is Barbara Hawkins, November Commissioner Calvert. We've got a couple other people in between. So I'll be looking for those invitations. If you didn't leave your email address, please do so that we can get those out to you today. So if those of you who have to go, I'm gonna just tell you, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for being boots on the ground, and we're gonna be contagious boots on the ground. And then a couple more people had questions for those of you who can stay.
Didn't have a question, but maybe a comment in reference to something that Chris said about the new Jim Crow and the situation that exists that has been perpetuated to some degree by 45. When he said reference to the National Football League and the Colin Kaepernick's situation, lock those MFs up, SOBs or whatever he says. We have a problem in our country, and you highlighted that by giving some of the statistics about the incarceration of people of color. And at our church, we have, as a member, the leader of the prison fellowship, and we do ministry to those who are incarcerated 4 days out of 5 during the week. But what is clear to us is that that's not the answer. That's a Band-Aid because it's helping them after they get incarcerated. And my question, not only to you, Chris, but to everybody in here is, what can we do as a community and as a people to address the issue of the imbalance of black men and women being incarcerated? Because it goes through the legal system, it goes through that prejudice that exists, that if you're black, you're automatically wrong, and you're not given the benefit of the doubt. You have to go with no lawyer or a court-appointed lawyer who is making a paycheck. So how do we get the country to see that that's the problem, is that we start out behind the 8 ball, and we're incarcerated unfairly, and the statistics prove that. So even though we're doing a lot to try to help those once they get in and to help them to get out and stay out, but I'd rather them not get in the first place. So can you address that?
So I believe that it's a very thoughtful question, and you know, how do you change the 13th Amendment when your balance within your House and your Senate are not, you know, going to see that as being a solution? So, you know, I think our dollar speaks for us, since we typically are the #1 consumers within America. And if we learn how to use that dollar and to boycott in certain ways, just like the Montgomery Improvement Association led to the Montgomery bus boycott, that we were then able to win the day because we controlled the power of the dollar. And that, to me, is still the solution set that we have to be able to exercise. Problem is, this generation does not believe in having a central authority as a leader. So when we look at Black Lives Matter, for instance, across all of your major cities, you have different people who talk. Everyone can talk. And I think one of the downsides of a movement like that is that you have never seen the movement be able to move progressively into fighting and creating a situation where we can win, because there's no one appointed leader. The model of having a Dr. King who has a dream, that has leadership and has responsibility, or a Malcolm X, those days we're not there. So even when I say economic boycott, who's going to suggest it? Who's going to follow it? How does that work under this new model that we've we've come under this Black Lives Matter and so forth. So that's, for me, that's what I kind of work through. And then I say, well, maybe Black Chambers of Commerce are a solution, but you know, most of our Black businesses don't even join our chambers for the most part. And so in every organization, you may have 10% of the population that will be a member, you know, whether it's the church, whether it's the chamber, whether it's our social organizations. Those are always those challenges. And so today, I think there's so much choice that we have because of freedom that we simply have failed to be able to organize. And that's why I think, you know, and I always remember this, and I'll turn the mic back over, is our president said in a recent speech that the prisons have room to lock more people up. And then even though some of you may see when he attacks Jeff Sessions, Attorney General, you know, in the military we have this phrase called fog and friction. So some of you feed on the, wow, he really doesn't like Jeff Sessions, and Jeff Sessions doesn't recuse himself, but that's smokescreen. Jeff Sessions is working right now with his legal team, and he's undoing every single thing that would enable us to have a new, you know, position as being people who can stand on our own 2 feet and have a Black Wall Street like we had back in the day. I mean, every single thing, they're breaking it down in law, and so they're doing a very effective job of making America great again, or 1920s again. But I mean, like I said, and then I look at our NAACP, and while I'm a member, too many of our millennials don't see NAACP as being relevant. So again, we have a situation, if we were in a space shuttle out there, we'd be calling back to NASA saying, Houston, we have an emergency, we have a problem. Because we've enjoyed the fruits of what freedom tastes like. And we've become so individualized to where it's not about us, it's about me. Until we can get even I'll say this, even until we can get our kids and our families back into faith communities, whether it's a synagogue, a mosque, or a church, they don't even know who God is. And I think that was a unifying force that we had, at least back when we had Dr. King and so forth, Malcolm X. I mean, at least they were reverent to something that was greater than themselves. But how do you teach people who just don't have the same foundation as you when they look at themselves as their own God? Scary. But Terry has a solution.
Oh, okay, I'm gonna get my story. Okay, last two, because I know like it's probably, it's just about 1:30 here.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Betty Moore from the Coast Travel. Over the years, I had my general contracting company and went through all the rope to try to get established as a general contractor, you know, get contracts and all. Won some pretty nice ones. But what I did notice that when we started hiring people to work, how it seemed to cause friction when I made it all black. I came against those challenges with the city that I needed to hire other races in my general contracting business. And it seemed like because of that, my contract wasn't renewed. I'm seeing that some of the solutions are that we have to fight against policies that exist that's not in writing. A lot of those things that they're telling us we can't do is not even in writing through the city. So when you come into those challenges where you feel like you can't hire your own people because you got too many, and you can't get a contract because of that, what do? So what I've learned is that you buck against the system and you hire them anyway, but then you don't get the next contract, and that's quite all right. Because then you have to stop worrying about getting city contracts and started doing something else to get jobs, get work for the people. Well, right now, a lot of people don't realize it, but we hear people talk about residual income. We have a young man who have blew up in the travel industry with over 20,000 black individuals that are working in the industry as travel agents, doing an excellent job. We don't get to hear about that. But if you ever go to one of the conferences that they have, I cried the whole time I was there in Atlanta, and I seen all these black young people going across the stage that's actually making over $100,000 a year just in the travel industry. I believe a lot of times we shut doors on areas where our people can make money, and we call it a what they call pyramid or Ponzi scheme. But the younger generation, the millennium, are in business classes that actually teaching them about entrepreneurship. And this is where I think it's lacking in our city, is that it's not awakening here in the city. In our city, we have over 600 people versus Dallas, we got over 3,000 people that are doing it. And I'm thinking it's like a fist shut, a gate shut in the minds of the people about entrepreneurship in a way that I believe that we need to open up some type of program that teach our young people to want to be in business for themselves, because it's not there and our young people don't see it. And so we're pushing them into college, and a lot of them coming out of college are not finding jobs, and that's becoming a problem for a lot of them.
A lot of good words, a lot of food for thought. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming. May God bless you greatly, be prosperous, and shine bright. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh,
Appreciate you.
so glad. Thank you so much. Good work.
How dare
Like that. Tree shaker or apple picker. Huh?
Hey, remember that? Yeah.
I got that. That's good. That's good.
And this is really, it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
But it's hard. Once you shake apple trees,
I hear you. Yeah.
people see you as that.
Yeah.
And we need to talk about that.
Yeah.
What you had mentioned
About the takeover?
We already started. Seriously.
All right.
So we already started, but I'll talk.
Okay, I'll get on you.
Thank you so much.
Can we leave?
Yeah, you did a great job.
I appreciate you, your friendship, and just, yeah.
Me and Brian have that conversation all the time.
I know. About the Border Patrol positions? Hold on a second. Hold on a second.
Really?
Yeah. All right.
Wonderful. I want to get makeup on. Wonderful, wonderful.
Sorry.
And I want to be able to share that. Are we going to be able to
Yes.
share it?
Yes.
I definitely want my
Yes.
son. I definitely want my son to hear it. Like you say, the young people. It's a lot of work to do.
Oh, man. Yes. Yes and yes and yes.
But you're a great advocate.
Well, hey, you know what? I love you and everything that you do. And you're encouraging, you're supportive, you're a fighter, and you bring things to awareness. And so,
We're trying to do our part, but it's just a lot going on. Yeah. But you know what I'm doing with my business? We hire a lot of second chances.
Oh, I know.
And I'm telling you, we finally found one, and this man did some serious time. But like, it took us years to find him.
No, you're wonderful.
I know how you do. I know how you do, and I'm glad you did that here. And I had no doubt you would, and I hope that it was received, man. I really do, because we needed to hear that message. The disunity is our problem. We have resources. Everybody in here has resources. Everybody in here, I looked around, kind of just did an unofficial poll. Everybody's blessed in here. We have some finances, but we don't have that unity.
Right. Collaborative spirit.
Collaborative spirit.
Umoja.
That's it.
That's it.
Umoja.